things off here?
Look, I mean, this is a game of high-stakes poker. And ultimately, if you see, I think the next move is really going to be Trump's probably going to do a 90-day, we believe, almost stay, as they try to figure out how they could ultimately get this sold or at least structured. We think Musk is going to play a key role in terms of X and ultimately could buy this 40 to 50 billion. I believe it would be the price tag without the algorithm. Oracle could be involved as well. And look, this is...
Dan Ives highlights the high-stakes situation surrounding TikTok, predicting a 90-day reprieve as officials work on a resolution. He believes Elon Musk could play a key role, potentially acquiring TikTok through X for $40 to $50 billion, with other tech players like Oracle possibly involved. Ives dismisses a TikTok ban, emphasizing its importance to US-China relations and the tech industry. He notes the pressure on social media stocks like Meta and Snap, but sees potential for a US consortium to secure TikTok's presence. Ives describes TikTok as a golden asset, with Musk positioned to lead efforts to resolve the issue through ownership or partnership. Ultimately, Ives argues that banning TikTok would harm 170 million US users and strain international relations. He expects a workaround to avoid negative industry impacts, with US tech companies collaborating to secure TikTok's future.
This is a very important matter, and especially in terms of US-China relations, and that's why the last thing that's going to happen here is that TikTok ultimately gets banned. They're going to work something out behind the scenes.
Dan, do you look at the social media stocks, the rival names selling off today, and what do you make of that?
Kelly, I think there was some open that this ban was actually going to happen. It was going to get enforced. Everyone knew the Supreme Court would ultimately, abide by this. And I think they're starting to realize the tea leaves, I can tell you about being the Beltway, they do not want this ban. This is a Pandora's box situation. That's why that's negative for Meta, negative for social media stocks. And ultimately, I think as this all plays out, this could be a positive if Musk ultimately really, wins this deal in some sort of consortium, that I believe other big tech players would be involved with as well.
Although we're starting to see them go back into the green. Meta, Pinterest, Snap is still fractionally lower. So maybe as this settles, Dan, maybe they're thinking, okay, maybe there's a chance. I mean, what's interesting is to watch the Chinese. If it has to be divested, but they don't choose to divest it, then that's it, game over. I mean, they could just shut it down. They could just decide not to go down that path.
Yeah, no doubt, Kelly. But that's why I think behind the scenes, you've seen Trump actively reaching out, what we've seen leaders in Beijing. I think also things behind the scenes, because they don't want to, if this got shut down, I mean, this could have a cascade effect, be negative, of course, for names like Apple, Tesla, and others. But it all comes out to 170 million U.S. consumers are on this. So they don't want this shut down. And that's why I think they're looking for workarounds around it. And I think even in the Beltway, they've recognized it's a third rail issue as they've sort of set this in motion. I think this ultimately ends up in either an ownership or partnership with U.S. tech players, and that's why I think everyone's going to be focused on it. It's a golden asset to be going after TikTok. I think Musk front and center with X.
But Dan, I put myself in the shoes of a Google, of an Apple. These companies have to decide basically Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, whatever the exact moment is, whether to allow people to download the apps from the App Store, right? They have to decide whether they're going to let notifications go through on devices, whether they're going to continue to support them, technically speaking. So if I'm them, I need to know pretty clearly that I'm going to have legal cover for what to do or not do here. This is really tough territory for them to be in.
It's a huge quagmire, but I do believe this will not be enforced. That's something, I think ultimately through DOJ, and that they're going to have to communicate that these companies will not pay fines. Remember, it's also the hosting providers as well, but that's why I get the popcorn out. I mean, Sunday morning, but I do not expect that TikTok ultimately comes off of the App Store. I think that's right now, our view going into this weekend.
All right, Dan, we'll leave it there for now, but I love the updates. Appreciate you sending them out as we get new information. And thanks for joining us today. Dan Ives of Wedbush.
Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang in visiting China this week as the White House announces new export limits on AI chips. The new curbs causing shares to sell off over the last several days here. How do you view these new rules impacting Nvidia and other chip companies in the year ahead?
First of all, it's pretty unclear and it's unprecedented. And what I mean by unclear is the ruling relates to semiconductors that either are purpose-built for AI or are designed for AI. And that would put all gaming chips, for example, in that category. They might be primarily designed for gaming, but they're very much designed to have AI capabilities in them. And on the unprecedented part, you're looking at 120 countries, many of them sitting in the EU, like Portugal or even Mexico, that now have limits on that. And this is all going to be managed by a government agency. And I can't think of a worse thing for innovation and speed and revenue than having a traffic cop. I think we're all in on national security, but this is the wrong answer, and I fully expect the new administration coming in to overturn most of the onerous elements of this and maybe provide some clarification.
So then, Patrick, I guess then that would lead me to believe that the market's reaction might be a bit of an overreaction if you are confident that we are going to see a quick change once Trump does enter the White House. I
mean, 2 or 3%, and on Nvidia, and Nvidia was sliding based on the perceptions coming out of CES 2025. I think investors took it as a non-issue or a wait and see until the new administration comes in.
Okay, so all these things considered, how are these companies going to be navigating some of the international relationships that they've also communicated to investors is baked into some of their own growth anticipations as well?
Well, if this moves forward and it goes into effect in 120 days, unless the new administration comes in and squashes it or slow it down, is they have to hire a bunch of consultants to figure out how to manage that. There's a 128-page document that lacks a bit of clarity. And what they're going to have to do is every company is going to come up with their own strategy to deal with this. A lot of companies aren't going to have an issue because they have nothing to do with clusters. But when you look at AI clusters, but when you look at companies like Nvidia and AMD, they're going to have to get, and even Intel, they're going to have to get very clinical on exactly how many chips that they can ship into a certain country. And I think the EU's response, that's typically pretty onerous and heavy-handed, they're even saying that this move is a step in the wrong direction and can potentially shift them in the hands of buying more from companies like Huawei, which is exactly the opposite of what this IFR is supposed to achieve.
I guess I was also thinking about the latest salvo and the back and forth between China and the United States involves these mature node chip makers that we are subsidizing. Is the U.S. subsidizing those and harming Chinese companies, or are they just looking for things, given that, we've retaliated? Are they retaliating against some of the things we're talking about with China?
Yeah, I think that's some retaliation, and China's trying to find ways to retaliate where they can. And I'll say that the U.S. export controls on China have been pretty effective. China really cannot access leading edge manufacturing technology. They can't access leading edge AI technology. The Nvidia chips, the top end Nvidia chips aren't accessible within China, and I think China's trying to strike back wherever they can.
The comments from Jensen Huang. He was excited about quantum, and then he kind of revised that it's 20 years away or 15 to 30 years away for actual application. So AI is even closer, still in maybe somewhat the payoff is in the future, but 15 to 30 years for quantum. We got all excited about that this week, Chris.
Yeah, it's a very promising technology. It's not ready for mass market right now. Nvidia is actually holding an event with some quantum companies coming up, and I think Jensen has his reputation very well earned of being kind of on the forefront of this stuff, and I think he wants to be involved. But the other side of that is in the near term, even kind of 2-5 years, and that what Jensen is doing with accelerators in AI, and really it goes even broader than that. As a result of the slowing of Moore's law, the fact that CPUs don't drive the same performance as they did, that's the story in semis right now.
Okay, as I said, it's kind of inscrutable. So what are your favorite stocks right now, Chris?
Yeah, we like Nvidia, and some of the concern, the reason why the stock has kind of flattened out here is some concerns about the new product cycle, Blackwell, how quickly it ramps. Based on what we saw in the supply chain, we're keeping expectations kind of in check here for the first half of the year as they do that transition. We expect a really good second half of the year as more capacity comes into play. And our favorite name right now is actually Micron, the memory producer, which is a tangential exposure to AI because there's a certain flavor of memory, HBM, that goes into AI. Micron just getting into that market. And what the reason why Micron stock is where it is because, again, that cyclical part that's exposed to handsets, PCs, traditional server has been weak. They've been burning inventory on it. And our thesis on that one is as the cyclical part stabilizes and then starts to improve as the inventory burns off, then you start to get you start to get the good news from AI coming into the numbers.
The TikTok debate highlights US-China tensions and high-stakes tech strategies. Dan Ives foresees a 90-day reprieve to avoid a ban, with Elon Musk potentially leading a $40 to $50 billion acquisition through X, alongside possible partners like Oracle. Banning TikTok could harm US-China relations and impact 170 million US users, making a US-led ownership solution likely. Social media stocks like Meta and Snap face volatility as the situation unfolds. Meanwhile, US export controls challenge semiconductor giants like Nvidia and Micron, though AI-driven innovations offer growth opportunities. Quantum computing, while promising, remains distant from practical application. Balancing innovation, security, and economic interests will shape the future of tech and global relations. Should the US prioritize ownership solutions for TikTok over outright bans? How will export controls impact US leadership in AI and semiconductor technology?